Hello viewers, my name is Andrew Dean. I'm the Vice President of Research and Innovation at Lakehead University, and I'm happy to bring you another edition of Research Matters. Maybe just be a little bit reflective here. What is research? Why should it matter to you and to me? For us researchers, it's an ongoing process of honing our problem-solving skills. Through research, we seek answers to the unknown. We learn something new, and we challenge ourselves to find innovative approaches and solutions. Ultimately, through these solutions and innovations, we improve our lives. Today, I invite you to meet one of our very accomplished researchers, Dr. Amanda Diochon. Amanda is an associate professor in the Department of Geology and the Faculty of Science and Environmental Studies, and also a research chair in biogeochemical cycling of carbon in northern soils. She is the coordinator of the Water Resource Science Program, director of the Environmental Lab, president-elect of the Canadian Society of Soil Science, and co-chair of its Soil Education Committee. She's also mom to two awesome boys. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks, Andy.
So, what is soil?
And
how did you become interested in soil science?
Well, so soil is that unconsolidated material that we find at the surface. And unconsolidated sounds like kind of a big word, but it just means that it's not rock. So it's that loose material, it's mineral material, it's organic matter and voids or pore spaces that can be occupied by soil or by water or air, sorry. And so how I became excited about soil and engaged with soil science was just through observing. So being outside, noticing, hey, the plants here differ from the plants over there, or we're seeing different types of soils or changes in plant communities. And starting to think about, well, why does that happen? And in a lot of cases, it's because of the soil and soil properties that are there. And so one question always leads to another question in research. And that led me to a career in soil science.
Well, it's a great career. But tell me, we often see our soil in our gardens, and it's our hobby gardeners. But why should we care about soil?
Oh, well, soil has so many important properties that affect our day-to-day lives that we don't even think about. So soil provides a lot of services to society. It filters water. It's the medium that we grow a lot of our food and fiber in. And it provides the nutrients that are needed for a lot of the plant and microbial and animals that live in the soil as well. And it also plays a really big role in the global carbon cycle. And why we should all care about that is because of changes in climate and atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases. Because changes in climate and how we're managing the land have big implications for concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So that's some of the reasons.
Some of the reasons. With researchers, we're always engaging our students. We're trying to get students excited about being part of our research projects and maybe even seeing that as a career. As a soil scientist, how do you get students excited about that, and how do you engage them?
Yeah. Well, soils are it's a hands-on discipline. And the best way to experience soil is interacting with it and literally getting your hands dirty. And so bringing students out into the field, seeing different soils, experiencing soil properties, so what they feel like, because soils have texture. And so we can do hand texturing, which is as simple as adding some water, rolling it into a ball, rolling it into like a little worm, like we probably always did when we were kids with Play-Doh, trying to make ribbons out of it. Looking at color, either with, there's actually books, just like paint chips, they're based on they use the same colors as paint chips. And there's also apps that we can use to characterize soils and describe soils. So I think getting students involved, getting the public involved in actually experiencing soils, opening up a soil pit, seeing the colors. And then in my lab, in my specific research program, getting into some of the different methods that range from, I don't know if you ever made mud milkshakes when you were a kid, but I know I did. And there's actually a couple of tests where we literally shake soil up with water and we measure how much carbon is in our milkshake. And that's actually an indicator of what is available to the microbial community, which is doing all of the work to release nutrients that are tied up in organic matter for plants that we depend on for food and fiber to grow.
Do you think people are becoming more aware that soil is such a vital part of our ecosystem and it plays a role? Or?
I think soil's really taken for granted. We don't think a lot about soil in our day-to-day life. In Northern Ontario, because we're so ingrained and we spend so much time in the outdoors, people may be more aware of soil or have a greater awareness of soil and the role that soil plays in provisioning food and fiber production, in water quality, in those aspects of soil science. Whereas in more populated areas like cities and whatnot, that connection it really isn't there. But it can be through soil education and engaging with children and with the public on different soil properties and the important role that soil plays in our everyday life.
We often hear the phrases soil health or the health of the soil. Can you maybe tell us what that would mean to you?
Oh, so soil health, just like our own health, can be kind of complicated. We can take our temperature. It might be normal. Does that mean that we're healthy? Not necessarily. And so soil health really builds resilience. And that whole idea of soil health and healthy soils is very much akin to our own health. And that there's not just one measure that we can take on our bodies that will necessarily indicate soil health. But we know that if we're getting enough sleep, if we're eating properly, if we have our temperature in the proper range, if we're maintaining body health and body fat, then that makes us more resilient and better able to cope with stress and serve our communities. And so that's very much like the soil.
I think it's a beautiful analogy. We need to take care of our health if we want to be here tomorrow. We need to take care of our health of our soils if we want us to also be here tomorrow as well.
Absolutely.
All right, dear viewers, we're going to take a brief break and we'll be back with Dr. Diochon right after the break. Welcome back, viewers. For those who have just joined us, we're bringing you Research Matters with Dr. Amanda Diochon, Associate Professor in the Department of Geology. So broadly speaking, what we heard from the first segment, just to sum it up, is that soil science is all about the formation, the distribution, the composition of soil and how its properties, organic and inorganic processes, interact with wider environmental systems. So, Amanda, can you tell us about some of your specific research areas and interests right now?
For sure. So, as you mentioned, and as we talked about in the last segment, organic matter is a really important component of soil. And that is really the heart of my research program. I would argue it's the heart of the soil, too. But soil organic matter is the largest terrestrial reservoir of carbon. So it means there's a lot of organic carbon bound up in that organic matter. So it has important implications for soil fertility and a lot of those services that we talked about earlier, and how we manage the land and how disturbances impact the land, that affects organic matter levels in the soil. So forest harvesting practices, what kind of crops we're growing, what kind of changes in climate we're seeing, how we're fertilizing the land, that will all affect organic matter levels because they're a balance of inputs and outputs to the system. And those outputs are really affected by, well, they're a reflection of decomposition. So it's really that decomposition process releases or nutrients from the organic matter to the soil, but it also releases carbon dioxide in the process. So the little organisms that live in the soil are processing organic matter in much the same way our body does. So if we think about aerobic or how we are processing a lot of organic matter, we take in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide, and that's the same as what's happening in the soil. So how we're managing soil plays a big role in what's happening with how much organic matter is being returned and how much organic matter is being released, or how much carbon is being released into the atmosphere. So that's really what's been driving my work. And we use a lot of indicators in my research group to inform kind of how land management practices are impacting organic matter stores and organic carbon stores. So that's really been the heart, I guess, of what I've been working on for the past several years, many moons. Yeah.
So you and I have known each other for quite a while, and
Yes.
how you've had many different research activities. Can you tell us about some of the past research activities and maybe how they've brought you to this stage of your research career?
For sure. So I was hired into this position as an environmental geologist slash terrestrial biogeochemist. And it took a while to be like, hey, what does that actually mean? But the environmental geology component really touches on the effects of how we manage the land on organic matter. And then the terrestrial biogeochemistry is the carbon piece. So projects that I've been working on, a big focus of my work over the last 10 years since I've been here has really been on wood ash. And so wood ash is produced when we burn wood, and sometimes we burn wood for energy. So Resolute burns some of their wood waste and their paper mill residuals to create energy. Well, that creates wood ash waste. So wood ash is actually, it's got a high pH, it's alkaline, it contains a lot of nutrients like phosphorus and potassium, calcium. It's basically a liming agent. And so we can, instead of sending that to the landfill, we can actually land apply that. And a lot of it is almost like a circular economy where we've harvested the forest, we've burned some of those residues, those waste residues, and then we're returning that material back to the land to benefit. Because a lot of the soils around here are acidic. They're naturally acidic. And nutrients are more available at a circumneutral pH, so around a pH 7. And in a lot of cases, they need some nutrients too. They need some vitamins. And so adding this wood waste back has the added benefit of potentially increasing productivity of the forests and agricultural lands. And at the same time, that productivity can lead to increasing organic matter levels in the soil. So it can also have a positive effect on the amount of organic matter, the amount of carbon that's stored in the soil. So that's been a big focus. Another focus is looking at the effects of climate change on disturbance and say fires, for example. So how does fire impact organic matter stores? How does that compare with what we see with a forest harvest and what are the implications there for organic matter stores as well, from that context. And my more recent work, well, wood ash has continually been a theme. We've looked at that across Canada. It's where Thunder Bay has a site that is part of a national network called AshNet, looking at the effect of applying wood ash waste to forested systems, and then collaborations with Resolute in an agricultural context as well.
So you mentioned Resolute, but who are some of the other partners that you've been able to work with?
Yeah, so I'm like so grateful for all of the support. So we've done work with Resolute, we've done work through, funding through OMAFRA, through Grain Farmers of Ontario has been a really great supporter of the work that has been ongoing. NSERC, NOFIA, LUARS, of course, internally, has been a great supporter of our work. And I'm just, and the MNR as well. Dave Morris at Sinver has been a fantastic collaborator, and NRCan has also, the program of energy has contributed funding as well. They've been, amazing partners, really, really amazing partners.
They are amazing, and that's a lot of acronyms.
I know.
Maybe what does NSERC stand for?
Oh, the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada.
Okay.
And so they support both basically fundamental research through their Discovery Grants program, and then they also support partnerships with industry and nonprofits and non-governmental organizations. Yeah.
And LUARS, of course, is Lakehead University Agricultural Research Station.
You bet.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Just before we take our break, I mean, sometimes we hear the words of a tired soil, or the soil has gotten tired. Is there any kind of truth to that, or?
I think sometimes soils, and I think it's really shifting, and it's one thing that I will say about producers in Northern Ontario. They really take good care of their soils. But I think, with agricultural production, forest production, and so on, if we expect too much of the soils and we're just always taking, then I think the soil can get tired too. And along with that soil health analogy that we talked about earlier, when I talk about that with students, I'm like, you can have a student that crams, they drink Red Bull, and they get the job done, but they're not healthy, and they're probably tired, as opposed to somebody that takes good care of themselves, you're nurturing, you're giving them what they need, then they're probably not as tired as those tired soils.
All right, so we don't want to crash and we don't want to be too tired. So we're going to take a short break right now. We'll be right back and resume this very interesting conversation with Dr. Diochon. Welcome back, viewers. So this is our last segment with Dr. Amanda Diochon in the Department of Geology at Lakehead University. So as you know, research matters. Why does soil science matter?
Oh boy. Well, I think soil science matters for all the reasons that we talked about. I mean, I think soils matter because of those provisioning services, the services that they give to us in terms of filtering water, in terms of harboring biodiversity. People often feel a really deep attachment with the soil. There can be like a spiritual, cultural component to that. Lots of feedbacks with the climate system, for example. So research on soil really matters because I think it impacts our bottom line. Like if we're taking good care of our soils, then we won't have as great a need for applying things like mineral fertilizer. Nothing wrong with mineral fertilizers. They're really great, but they do come at a cost to the economy, to producers, to farmers, and also to the environment. So I think how we manage the land, how we manage soil, it matters. And that research is really important, especially in a changing climate.
I think what you've really shown us today with this conversation is that soil is more than just something to grow our food in. It's also very much affected by climate change, or will affect climate change. Also just how we interact with it in an ecological sense as well. But can you tell us a little bit about, specifically for our region, Northwestern Ontario, what's your observations about soil and soil here?
Okay, well, one project that I haven't talked about, but that is also really important and really cool, is a land clearing project that I've had going for the past few years. So in Northern Ontario, across Northern Ontario, we see climate's changing. So it creates challenges, it creates opportunities, and opportunities for agricultural expansion into more northern regions. And that involves the conversion of forest or scrubland to agricultural land. In a lot of cases, that was agricultural land not all that long ago. But in being out sampling in Rainy River, around Thunder Bay, down in Algoma, over in Cochrane, in the New Liskeard area, you really get to see the diversity of soils in the area and how soil forming factors, which we didn't talk about, but soil formation really impacts the soils that develop. So there's a lot of diversity across Northern Ontario. One thing that I've really noticed is, and I already mentioned this, is that there's a real deep connection with the soil, and farmers are really committed to being good stewards of the land. Out in the forest, I would argue it's much the same thing. Like, there's lots of really great regulations that have been put forward by the provincial government, that have been informed by really great science, that are designed to ensure that those organic matter levels are maintained and enhanced, because it benefits the economy, it benefits society, and it benefits the environment.
It's very interesting you mentioned about increasing of agricultural land. I mean, I read something the other day that was saying, Ontario's losing 300 acres a day just to urbanization, and that's basically 300 acres of agricultural land. And either you stop that or you find somewhere else where you're going to be able to have that agricultural land. And we do have a lot of land here, but not a lot of it's growing agriculture. So it is an important observation.
And the soils up here are a lot different than what we see in Southern Ontario. Land is classed for agricultural production, and most of the good agricultural land is down south, and even across Northern Ontario. Like, some of those soils are definitely challenging to farm, and I think that that's another motivation as well for farmers to really be taking good care of their soils, to ensure that they are being productive and they realize the benefits of maintaining those soils. I mean, we've had crazy weather the past few years, crazy droughts last year. You think back to our spring this year, planting was late. So I think being good stewards of the environment is just, it's critically important, because it really helps you to ride those waves that we're seeing.
You mentioned that a couple of times, Amanda, about how the farming community, or the people who are on the land here, have a real, I don't know, almost a reverence or an understanding of their soils and take good care of it. Do you think it is because the soil is hard or harder to grow on, or is it something about the people, or something?
I think it's about the people. just just amazing. Like I've just met some really, really amazing, dedicated, hardworking people, day in and day out. Like I just have so much respect for these farmers across the north.
That's wonderful to hear. So you're a co-editor of a book published in 2021, Digging into Canadian Soils, An Introduction to Soil Science. Maybe you could show it to the viewers and...
Yeah, so I'm afraid I'll, like if I touch it, it'll fall over. But Digging into Canadian Soils is the first really Canadian textbook. It's an open education resource. So what that means is that anybody can access it and it's free. So it was created by members of the Canadian Society of Soil Science. I had the opportunity to work with this amazing team from right across the country. And as soil scientists in Canada, I think we punch above our weight. Like we're in a higher, definitely, we're doing a great job. But this book was 3 years in the making. It's been really inspiring to see the uptake, and it's got chapters of the soils for each region of the country, which we've never had before. And Canada has our own system of soil classification, and that's one thing that was really missing in a lot of the other soils textbooks, was a Canadian context. And so it was a really, really fun project to work on. It's getting lots of buzz nationally and internationally, and it's really beautiful. There's beautiful pictures in there, and it's really accessible and really well written. And I can say that because I didn't write it. I just had the opportunity to edit it and work with some really amazing people.
All right, thank you, Amanda. It's truly fascinating. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience as a soil scientist and talking to us about the interesting world of soil, the most fundamental element of our environment and the basis for all our terrestrial life. So dear viewers, we'll meet you again with another engaging research topic and a researcher from Lakehead University. I'm Andrew Dean, Vice President of Research and Innovation at Lakehead University, wishing you the very best.